to Thirdera's overview of our ServiceNow certified offering called DevOps Connect. So the reason why we created this offering called DevOps Connect is to connect IT operations with application development groups. Inside most organizations we come across, as application development groups adopt more and more of a DevOps methodology, there tends to be a greater and greater divide between those DevOps methodologies and our legacy IT operations. And that divide is caused by just a misalignment of goals between those groups. Right? Our IT operations groups are tasked with standardizations, compliance, security, frontline support, whereas our application development groups are tasked with delivering features, functionality, mitigating defects as quickly as possible. There's times where those application development groups look at our IT operations and just see them as a barrier to them being able to achieve their task. Meanwhile, IT operations people are looking at DevOps, the application development teams going, these guys are just the wild, wild west. So our DevOps Connect offering is to help bridge that gap between these two groups, right? So it's a win-win situation for both teams. And it's not just an offering that just benefits one side. So what we get out of this and above is kind of a standard high-level DevOps process flow, right? Where we have stories, development happens, builds are created, testing happens. And then as we wrap this ServiceNow kind of wrapper around the pipeline, right? Now we're able to consume traceability data, application performance data, development performance, look at things like application drift, measure compliance and security, even automate updates to the CMDB. And even lastly, the things developers may hate to do the most is automate change management. So a process that we can put around your existing pipeline in order to, like I said, help both org groups achieve their goals, right? And how do we do that? We do it based on these 4 key pillars. So from our DevOps change management perspective, we're able to do automated change management. From a traceability perspective, associate stories and test results to changes, automate approvals, and automated risk assessment. So we can do things like control how the pipeline flows based upon application and development team performance. From a configuration standpoint, as the changes flow through the pipeline, we're taking snapshots of those applications so we can look at how the application changes over time. So this helps us with application sprawl, but it also helps us with our incident and problem management functionality where we can look back at various snapshots to say the application worked fine here, didn't work here, compare the snapshots, look at the deltas, and potentially identify any issues from there. Because it's fully integrated, our CMDB is auto-updated, so no manual updates, no manual entries are required. Just as the changes flow through the pipeline, we can kick off things like a service map job to go through and do a scan of the entire app stack. And then we can also do some config validation, right? So this is where we can codify compliance, codify security, make sure we don't have hard-coded passwords or, just some of the basic things like that we can build into the pipeline just to ensure that compliance and security. Now, the other 2 features that we've layered onto this to make this all-encompassing is application portfolio management as well. So this gives us, the view of the complete app stack. So if you're an application owner, application developer, right, you can come into ServiceNow, you can get a great picture of how the entire app stack is made up, all the services or CIs or components that may make up that application. We also get the ability to actually track the total cost of ownership of the application because now not only can we look at the infrastructure cost, the licensing cost, but then we start to factor in the stories, in the work effort, and it gives us a much better idea of how much time, effort, money we're spending on maintaining a particular application. And then even we get back, visibility into the backlog of work. So, most developers like their tools like Jira or Azure where they manage their stories. Well, not everyone has access to that. By integrating with ServiceNow, we can see those stories and those updates, those defects in the backlog from ServiceNow and from those other tools and share information between them. And even, from an incident management perspective, anything that's created, then we can turn that straight into a defect and kick it over into Azure or Jira, your tool of choice for managing stories. And then lastly, we'll talk about AIOps and using ServiceNow AIOps engine for correlating event data, taking that event data, tying it back to applications, development teams, and then because now we have that event data plus our incident data, problem data, we can look at tracking of application performance, air budgets, things like that, development team performance, how many changes are they deploying, how many defects do they have, how many issues are there. As we mentioned before, the automated risk assessment, right? We use that information then to inform our automated risk assessment process. So all of this then becomes full circle. It's actually kind of depicted here on our kind of infinity chart of a DevOps process or architecture, where we have our planning phase where stories are managed, and then from our stories, then we have integrations to our code repositories, whether it's GitLab, Bitbucket, and then tying that into our testing pipelines, the actual pipelines and code deployment tools themselves, such as Terraform, Jenkins, integrating those with, you see, the DevOps change and config processes, tying that into our configuration management tools, so like Ansible, Puppet, Chef, any of those deployment tools for deploying config, and then consuming that information back into ServiceNow, tying it back into our AIOps, where we have a deep list of applications where we can consume data from, such as Splunk, Dynatrace, AppDynamics, Datadog. And then lastly, that information then provides input back into areas where we may need to further invest into the application. So these are all components that are fully integratable into our application management process that's included with DevOps. One of the things quickly we'll touch on is our multi-phased approach. And the point here is that not only does each account have different levels of maturities, a lot of times it's even different levels of maturity within each team. So this gives us the ability to meet not just the company level maturity, but each team's level of maturity with where they are. An immature team, we can come in and do a phase one approach. Meanwhile, another team within the same organization may have been doing DevOps for years, much more mature, and we can come in and do a phase four, which is much more mature, much more advanced, and would provide the true value benefit that a team like that would be looking for. So we certainly have the ability to meet you where you are in your journey. So what does that look like? Well, here's a sample of a real pipeline where changes have flown through, some successful, some unsuccessful, and you can see what that looks like as they flow through Azure. And then we take a quick look here as what that looks like inside of ServiceNow. So it's the same pipeline. Data gets consumed, brought in. You can see some of the data here that gets brought in as part of that. And then on the flip side, now they get into some of the measurable dashboards I was talking about before around, how many instances did we have? What's our availability look like? What are our outages? What's our error budget for these? So, this is just a quick overview, but you can see there's a lot of value certainly here in our DevOps Connect offering. And if you're interested, please look up Thirdera, hit our socials, and we would love to help you further. Thank you for your time.